Greetings, greetings, one and all, once again. This is Jagger Johnson. For those of you who might not be familiar with me, you can search me up on Facebook or YouTube by typing Jagger Johnson, New Providence, Bahamas, or email me at antichristeveryday@gmail.com. My network would be spiritually based, not racist or terrorist. However, I am not of any religious movement or religion besides the truth, and not theory or belief. However, one might comment in opposition, but you won't argue with me maybe because I might be miles away, whether it's because of your ego or your hopes and foundation is set on deceit, and it hurts to know that it was all a lie and a myth, and you were only being used to regenerate more manipulated minds, or you are just a direct snake in sheep's clothing. However, whether you disagree or agree with me, you won't lie to yourselves deep down inside on behalf of that of the following: spiritual wickedness. Deceit is the main issue. Deceit is the key weapon used against us, or that we use against ourselves. Idol worship, false gods being our direct downfall. Idol worship, which promotes and condones a whole host of other iniquities that would maintain plagues, poverty, violence, and affliction upon us. Us in particular, as a race, no longer a nation, being scattered amongst the nations, as so-called blacks claim independence and pledge our allegiance to so-called third world democracy, which is already really colonialism in many Caribbean countries, which are mostly, especially Caribbean countries, which are mostly populated by blacks and are really Sodom and Gomorrah, especially countries shared by different nationalities, such as the USA, even continents like our homeland, Africa, which was already colonialized or seized long before we were separated or scattered abroad. Christianity being the height of deceit, especially in the Western Hemisphere. You can call a chair, or maybe a table, and just call that an interpretation in another language, but not the God of whom you praise. Besides, our God is a very jealous God. Besides the fact that we adopted the English language through slavery and oppression. Look at the ship. Look at the sail of the ship of Christopher Columbus. Or do you think he brought the West Indians salvation and civilization? He tricked them, then killed them, just the way we were done from our homeland. But the sad truth is, it is not the oppressor who has the power to enslave and oppress us. It is the same reason we were captives in the land of Egypt, for praising and worshiping idols, graven images. The Lord God of hosts had said to Moses, any carved or graven images of stone, wood, or any sort on your land is an abomination. For example, here in the Bahamas, where I live, there is an island, a part of the 700 chain of 700 islands and keys. It's called San Salvador. It bears a giant stone cross which commemorates the landfall of Christopher Columbus. It is an abomination, just as many monuments and many symbols which are erect and which are being highlighted and displayed around the world globally, throughout nations globally. This Christ Jesus, who really is he? Well, if the origin from which the name alone stems isn't bad enough or doesn't say enough, the image portrayed and the cross and the face which comes to mind, which is a vexation to God according to the Lord's passed down to Moses, those of which no matter who, what you say or think, no matter what New Testament controls the religious scenes, ask these pastors and so-called priests or ministers if these laws ever changed or who has the power to change them. They say no sin is greater than the other. That is not true. That is a lie. In regards to the direct instructions given by God to Moses, the penalty for homosexuality is death. Idol worship, you should be put to death. After enduring the wilderness and crossing over to Jordan, and heritage was restored, and the children of Israel inherited the land and settled there, a certain person possessed abominations which had brought plagues upon all redeemed after suffering in the wilderness all those years. The only way for the plagues to cease was for that particular individual or those individuals to be destroyed, and they were burned with fire. And then God was again at peace with all Israel. So one homosexual would cause it. So consider the fact that these so-called nations are polluted, infested with them. I should not have to go any further, but I will still share with you the answer to many questions. Not my opinion, but what I see with my eyes, from which I have obtained knowledge. The Lord said you require wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, not wisdom, belief, and understanding. Even these so-called teachings of Christ tells you that just believing in him won't save your soul from destruction, or even just praising him, but you must fully repent. But no man is perfect. So being non-perfect, such as myself, people here where I'm from would even, look back at me and try to dig up something negative about my past or my personal life, as if it has anything to do with whether what I'm saying now is true or not. Even King David, not justifying iniquity, but telling you the truth, the facts. Even King David himself, king appointed by God, directly by God, had done wrong in the sight of God. But unlike other kings before him, he had never forsaken God by praising another God, or even allying with the kingdom of Sodom and Gomorrah. So no man is pure but God, and only him can cleanse iniquity. But this whole spiritual war basically evolves around the question, who is God? That's besides the battle between good and evil within oneself. They make you seem as if you can kill 1 million people and then the very next minute pray to Christ and get instant forgiveness, and die the very next minute and go to heaven. That is false, not true. That is pure false, not true. Okay. Now, if you had praised the name of Satan, as long as you have done not one single iniquity, just because you were deceived, you praise that name, you would still be perfect, because you have done no iniquity whatsoever. But no man is perfect. And God is a jealous God. Furthermore, what would you rather, be blind or deaf? If you had to make a choice, what would you believe? What you hear or what you see? The Old Testament and the New Testament are both in the Bible, but one is lies and deceit, and the other is basic instruction directly from the Lord of hosts. instructions of which he had stated, none shall add or take away. So it isn't a matter of me leaning on my own understanding or you listening to me and I do not want to listen to you. Thus said the Lord God of hosts, none can add to my word or take away. So why are the so-called ministers not setting the spiritual foundation on these laws and these statutes of which the Lord had stated? None can add or take away. They do not administer these laws. They administer the laws, whereas the teachings of so-called teachings of Christ the New Testament in Christ Jesus, whatever. Does any of this change the laws, the statutes, and commandments passed down from God to Moses and the children of Israel? You answer that question within yourself and tell yourself and your household what it really means. Could this be the same? Could this be some ethical initiative whereas gays and sorcerers and idol worshippers and God's people could live as one? In other words, restore peace on earth? That is how it seems. But then why are they trying to take advantage of us? They come with their peace talks, stop the violence, charity, psychology, when they are the ones responsible for our breakdown and being plagued and afflicted. They continue this trend throughout society by maintaining vulnerability and weakness that they may seem to aid and help. It's how they force you to accept them. And also by administering pure deceit. And they say that if you are not a homosexual, then you have nothing to worry about, which means it is their right or their business. But it is everyone's business. And everyone's problem. Reasons being, if you pledge your allegiance to these nations or support governments condoning these lifestyles, whereas God would put plagues on a whole nation for just one simple abomination, it means you would be supporting plagues upon yourselves. Because it is the reason besides idol worship for the bloodshed, violence, plagues, poverty, and affliction. Yes, the homosexuality. And this very reason, they directly force others to seek refuge under the shadow of their wicked lifestyles, especially those who love vanity. God condemned them. This should be precisely the way He instructed. It's the way the law should be set. But those who claim to uphold the law, police, those who claim to uphold the law and govern the land, police, politicians, all heads of government, they are also, many of them, gay. And they will arrest you for a simple marijuana cigarette. It is allowed by God because you forsake Him and support it. And therefore we are afflicted. The snakes in sheep's clothing are not the whites. It is the blacks who maintain the curse upon us and hold these positions. And you still honor and commemorate them in return, just like a sucker for bad treatment. However, idol worship within itself is not the only method the oppressor uses to seize, oppress, and dominate many races and nations. But by enticing them and fascinating them with teaching them powers, in other words, sorcery, witchcraft, just like King Saul had done, rising raising familiar spirits, pneumocrats, mediums, when God's guidance and protection only requires by his law and his order faith, obedience, praise, and worship alone. Mediums, pneumocrats, raising familiar spirits is abomination, disobedience, and rebelliousness, and shows lack of faith, and is a main ingredient in larger secret societies, along with other dreadful sacrifices which would be required. Freemasons, Baphomet, Illuminati, sororities, fraternities are all different divisions of the same thing, all different for all different sectors of society, just for different sectors of society. Furthermore, for those of you who have internet access, type National Geographic, then type secrets of the Masonic Lodge. Hardly anything they tell you are the real secrets, unless it won't be a secret, would it? But they would tell you one thing for sure, which is my logic. The only permission granted to open a lodge or any lodge of this kind would be through permission from England, the Anglo-Saxon, the oppressor. Connecting the dots further, more, it proves all of those appointed by them are part or participant, especially the governor generals, the judiciary, and others who are required to study law in order to obtain certain positions. They would have to go to London to meet the requirements. Their parents were lodge members, so they easily got scholarships and the fundamentals, so they and you could imagine what else they obtained. Lodge membership was required also. The United States itself was seized by the Europeans, same way and reason they had seized Africa from us. But I am not Native American. I am black, so to speak, figure of speech. Back to this Christ character. If he had valued our lives or souls so much, and only reason for being conceived was to save us, then why did he end up in so-called heaven? And besides leaving us to suffer on earth and still have to perish and go to hell, let's say Joseph, the husband of Mary, was the descendant of David, of those of the Old Testament who obeyed, who was under the laws of God, passed down to Moses. He never put sperm into this Mary. She was supposed to have been a virgin, which proves Christ and the New Testament is in no way related to us. Those who administer the so-called gospel of Christ, they say one thing, but they do the other. They practice not what they preach. What do you believe? What they say or what you see? I see greed and homosexuality, child molestation, deceit. I know. The trials and tribulations and the plagues and the Pharaoh administration in the Old Testament is clear and present. You see everything that it says right going on right around you. You even see your reflection when you read the Psalms or you read the book of Deuteronomy or read the laws passed down, the books of Moses. It doesn't say one thing and you see another. You might not like the things that you see, but all of those things are happening for a reason. And if you search the reasons, you will find the truth and you will see the light. But these so-called miracles and teachings of Christ are absent when you open your eyes and look around you. But what you will see is what I am telling you. So try and listen to watch the remainder of this video and take heed to the following. The so-called miracles of Christ, do you see any sign of that? Or any proof that these were ever performed? This Christ or is supposed to have dated back to 5,000 years ago. Well, I resent that. Reasons being, if King Solomon and Queen Sheba could be proven to be related to Haile Selassie, which is the throne of David and Solomon, who were long before Christ according to the Bible, that is not true. The Bible was just recently written in between the 14th and the 18th century for the captives, especially those of Africa and those scattered abroad. In the East, where they say Christ had walked, if you mention his name, you are liable to be beheaded. Upon contemplating all being said, so far, arguments on behalf of what is true in the Bible or not, or when it was written, could never discriminate the true laws of God or criticize right from wrong. So you figure it out. Why being so deceitful and evil? Did they still have to put the truth? Why did they still have to put the truth in the Bible? Because it's God's covenant and his mercies which endure forever. And the oppressor, the Anglo-Saxon in particular, the English in our case here in the West Indies, were put over us by God for forsaking him. They were barbarians migrated from Germany. Go in the encyclopedia and look up Anglo-Saxon. They conquered England. Anglo is the root word for Anglican, meaning of English church, which also brings about the word angel, although the word might also be used in the Old Testament, but every word is in English, which is not our original context. But it is only to mean Spirit of God in that case. But God will never wipe out the enemy completely, even if we was to regain our heritage. Because when we forsake him again, they will storm out of their cave dwelling like locusts and invade us, conquer us, stand as power over us, and oppress us again. It is a curse from above. It is called affliction. They are also in control of hell beneath. They have many agents and vessels on earth from every stereotype and sector of society, mainly involved in secret societies. For them, there are many ways in and no way out, whether it was because gain, greed, envy, opportunity, seeking refuge, trying to escape affliction in the wrong way, for position, even on the streets. They are on the streets also. Or they were simply born in it and not sworn in it. But the most aggressive ones are the deceivers, snakes in sheep's clothing. They are the real threat. Pastors, politicians, missionaries, etc. They say everyone has the right to decide their own destiny, but that is not true. Right is right and wrong is wrong. You have a choice, but not a right. And that choice is the fruit of good and evil. If I want to take my head and bust it against a wall until I draw blood, that is wrong and a sin. But how can I tell God, hey, why did you give me the knowledge to take my head and burst it into the wall and draw blood? God gave you the energy to support your neck, that your head won't drop off your body, but he never told you to bust your head into a wall. So by asking God that question, you are tempting God, and therefore God will ignore you. Therefore, that is one of the reasons God seems to be ignoring the whole world. You have a choice. You do not have a right. That there is the choice is the fruit of good and evil. It is not a fruit like an apple or an orange or a pear. And that choice is the fruit of good and evil. So there is no such thing as gay rights. Haile Selassie. Let's go back to our heritage now. Our heritage. Haile Selassie, perfect example of what forsaking your own heritage, in other words, what God will cause. The throne of King David and Solomon, which is of monarchy, was converted to Orthodox Christian, defiled through Menelik and Selassie, who himself was allies with the British, who provided him with military aid, who is the enemy of whom he joined forces, which is an abomination. And he also fled to England. It is obvious he had done sorceries, large secrets, black Christ, Orthodox, the cross with the circle on top, any ornaments, no matter what color or creed they might represent, or images, including his face, are an abomination. He left Ethiopia afflicted. He even visited Jamaica, another colony, as another missionary, snake in lion's clothing this time, which brought about the Rastafarian movement. Them themselves, who deny being Christian, changed Jesus to Jesus, as if denying Christ. But the root word for Christian is Christ, whether Jesus or Jesus Christ. And furthermore, Jesus would be spelled with 2 S's. And furthermore, Emmanuel Edwards, this Emmanuel, who was supposed to have risen in 3 days, who was supposed to be the black Christ, whose corpse they had laid out awaiting his resurrection, who had never risen in this 3-day period, but started to decompose further. Furthermore, Jamaica is not a holy land. It is a slave colony. Nevertheless, a beautiful place and created by God. And Edwards is a heathen slave driver surname, just as my own. Martin Luther King, him of whom himself was Christian, was a sacrifice in a sense, whereas he was first of all a racist movement, when those before us who were black had caused us in bondage. So why fight for the sake of a color when we are already fighting against ourselves? So what does being black mean? We have to have our heritage restored. We have to build a relationship with God. And the true and living God, there's only but one God before we can stand up for anything, because nothing will stand without him. It's like building a house from halfway and going up. No foundation, no bottom, it will just collapse. And that is all it really is. And those such as Mr. King, who administered deceit, and those deceived, maintain this curse upon us. And we use this racist psychology to cover up and commemorate, and use this racist mentality to commemorate, cover up and commemorate themselves. They are also Freemasons. The Mississippi burnings, the churches, it was all a reverse psychology to make one feel as if they do not want us to praise this Christ, so he must be the real thing. So many would feel like it was to discourage them from doing so. Then many would worship it, saying to themselves, it has to be a reason they do not want us to worship this. Then you would commit the ultimate sin and run straight into the lion's mouth. Malcolm X, similar to Martin Luther King, and Rastafarian movement, racist psychology, because whites who are totally opposite race and are the oppressor in control apart from God, through afflict us, because of us being afflicted, not appointed by God, but allowed by God. Hating whites would be natural to blacks, and racism a main ingredient for deceit, whereas blacks, rebellious towards God, being afflicted, would be as if, hey, if you can't beat them, join them. But who God bless, no man curse, and who God curse, no man bless. So they deceive to duck the curse and take credit for brainwash education and maintaining an evil system as if they are some freedom fighters or fighters for independence. When we have no industry, we manufacture nothing, we build but make no material. Our greatest athletes, greatest achievers, we would have to go through whites and under the banner of whites. Food manufacturing, everything. You have to buy a grocery, right? We were the first civilization. But you take false credit. You can have the biggest house, the beautifulest house and yard, but you cannot grow food on it to feed your family. But you still satisfied with your lot. And many satisfied with their lot, and they will do anything to maintain it, even if it's keep the rest of us in bondage. And no, I do not envy anyone, especially the wicked. When we were the first civilization, but they take false credit for false achievements, then blame the youth for their lousiness, cowardliness, weak-heartedness, and use us as a monopoly board. They are snakes. See, whites and Chinese, for example, to name a few, they are the enemy. It's taught in history, social studies. That's old news. But the blacks are the snakes. But one must start with one's self and oust the false god and no longer be deceived. Otherwise, all arguments, pointing the finger, and even the truth is useless. Anti, meaning to oppose, to combat, standing against. For example, antibacterial, meaning to fight bacteria. My point, the words antichrist. The antichrist or an antichrist, used as a vessel by God, will emerge with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and it will be like Noah and the ark. Many will not be able to enter after the rain starts to fall. They all called Noah a fool in the beginning, like the chicken and the barn. They said, "Who's going to help me plant the corn?" "Not I," said the dog. Nobody wants to plant the corn, but everybody wants to raid the barn. So that there is the parable of Noah and the ark also. For example, this government would want to put the label on me now that this video if this video could get 60 billion views, or if for any achievement one may achieve, that you may bear the flag, and they know them themselves, it angers God. They will try to stick it on you for anything, achievement, for that very reason, that you may own up to their colonial nationality. Right now, it is the way they block your relationship with God in many ways, and that there is a perfect example. They try to keep you, colonialized, keep you defiled. I myself am not a Bahamian. I am an Israelite of the tribe of Judah, and Africa is no longer our home. Reasons being, because of affliction. We are like in the wilderness at the present time. And when God sees us obedient and restores our heritage, whatever land He chooses, allows us to seize and then settle, would be Israel. The people were Israel, not the place, because God created the whole earth. But one must first turn aside from falsehood and back to Him. My advice, watch the remainder of this video and trust in Him. In the day of being acquitted of one's affliction, one must, along with your household, take your blessings and make oneself independent, meaning grow your own produce, fish, farm, etc. One must not eat of anything forbidden by God. Children should be circumcised. You should hold the Sabbath and keep it holy. Read the books of Moses for further insight. Until the day of one's relief from being afflicted, we should practice now to the best of our ability. Obscene language is no good. I myself struggle with that error. We fight a war within ourselves, but you must never surrender. These snakes are not simply just if you can't beat them, join them, man. Being their motive. And there's no need to envy the wicked, because what's required of them you really would rather not take part. These people are intentionally, deliberately, strategically, even competitively evil. The following facts may be hard to accept for many and may hurt and make one feel betrayed or used or stupid or helpless on one end, and on the other end, if you are not a perpetrator, then if do no evil, fear no evil. To begin with, they would for example, they would turn off your electricity for a simple $100 if you are not a sorcerer. They would send their criminal counterparts to break in or even arm rob you. And then somewhere down the line, after, without you knowing that they were the perpetrator, advise you to join the lodge for protection and security indirectly. Not knowing that they were the perpetrators, one might consider, but it comes with sacrifices which would fall on your children, if not you right then. Sometimes not only to recruit one's soul, but to discourage you, whereas they would take over your market if you have a thriving business. And they will oust you because their secret society is global. Money is no issue, but the motive is to spoon feed their fags. And everyone else may remain vulnerable to either be a victim or join also. In many cases, to feed their fags, those of whom have first preference to many positions in the job market, government, and private sectors. Jobs are given to many non-sorcerers, people who are not sorcerers, just so that the government or corporation may seem to be providing jobs for the citizens, whereas they may get credit and further deceive the public, then down the line entice you with promotion and try to recruit your soul. They often come sexually, and after that they inch along with other propositions. Then it's welcome to the dark side. If not, they can even drop a wallet to set you up and then lay you off. Eventually, put their fags or women who are used to regenerate offspring of Sodom and Gomorrah and multiply Sodom and Gomorrah. These females, put them in your place. And these females even spitefully do so, because many men, after the sexual relationship is no longer, they neglect the child, and he or she is, even the child is spitefully used or even sacrificed. So therefore these women are left vulnerable, which does not make them right at all for this evil. But they then join these organizations, secret societies. 80% of them, 90% of them do not wear any large banners, but it is a secret. Because it is a secret. Positions range from McDonald's and Burger King straight up to the Queen of England, which is why they have this woman rights. It is an abomination. Men are supposed to be in full control, but it is the man's fault. Besides, many men are women themselves. We have a vast amount of them in society, a growing number. They have strategies on top of strategies, evil strategies. This is another strategy they use. They would send a woman, a witch, to entice a successful businessman, career person. Himself thinking that he is such a mark or hell of a man, would even marry this supposed lady who is a witch. And they will even send you a sweetheart afterwards. That's if, but might first wait until to see if you will get one yourself, so that she can divorce you and take everything you own. But this is no coincidence. You were targeted. Property, kids, etc. Just as the witch already is the property of this organization, your property and kids and home will become part of and property of the organization also. It is how it works. And if you yourself were to become desperate enough to bounce back or to get back on your feet, you could be further pressured through other avenues of your life from the same evil power and offered a proposition to sell your soul that you may get your life back together. Prior to complying or making this deal with the devil, when you reach on the dark side, you might even see these same two witches and then be manipulated and told in so many words that you should appreciate they did it to you, so that you should appreciate they opened your eyes. And you might even regain all your heart's desire. But you, along with your new life and your possessions and even your new kids, will be property of this organization. That's besides the dreadful sacrifices required. You might feel untouchable and one of the lucky ones, and might feel like predator and not prey as far as you are concerned. The only reason we are taking 2 steps forward and 10 steps back, is because of the curse upon us by God being afflicted. We are only here to take 2 steps forward and 10 steps back until we turn aside from falsehood and back to Him. The reason for being afflicted is that one may not rebel, but seek reasons for being so, which is the truth and the light. That is His mercies towards us, which is why it is written, it is easier for a camel to enter the eyes of a needle than a rich man to enter the gates of God's presence. So heaven is actually hell. Look at Dr. Miles Monroe, for example. Christ is a fraud. Being afflicted, even though one might think you are honest and hard working and even compliant with God, you are only compliant with the deceit of Christ and the system and not God, because God is a jealous God and will not partial, bend or bow a split second or microscopic bit or go back on His word, laws of Moses, which is why the world is in a suspense, the state it is in. And God may seem heartless, but it is not God. It is the deceiver, the snakes in sheep clothing. Not even wolves, because they are cowards. Their method is deceit, to make us even feel guilty for their benefit. No matter how many weapons or armies they have, they cannot touch you once you praise Him. They touch you, they only do it to try, discourage, and intimidate you, that you may be a fool and ask, God, how could you allow this to happen to me? And that is what the enemy wants. But if you continue to praise him, you will see the enemy disintegrate. And they cannot take your life. Just like King David and the Philistines, for example. They are homosexuals. God condemned them to death. But they can persecute you for marijuana, which is medicine. They themselves have even legalized it. Not just for medical, but recreational purposes. I even saw an article where a DEA agent who kicked down people's doors in front of their children and would take them away in front of their kids for this marijuana, along with other drugs like cocaine, whatever have you. But marijuana is also a part of his job to eradicate. So therefore, but this DEA agent still had to use marijuana through all of that to save his life, battling with some sort of disease or health problem after trying to destroy marijuana for all those years. He himself has to depend on marijuana to keep him alive. It is a spiritual war with physical odds. Witchcraft does not just work simple abracadabra, poof. Many or most people only complain when they have what they feel is the problem, whether it's being laid off or their family being murdered, and a whole host of other social or even personal issues, all stemming from one thing: affliction, the curse upon us, that is selfishness and even self-destruction, which gives them further advantage, and they all depend on the deceiver for solutions, which gives them further advantage. For example, if you work as a clerk or own a grocery store and are robbed or even killed, you sell items manufactured by the oppressor, which is why we are not independent. It is a curse upon us. So both the robber and those robbed are victims of themselves. Read the book of Lamentation. Not everyone who worships, not everyone who worships these false religions are evil because they seek God. But God is a jealous God. Jehovah's Witness and Rastafarians are right about everything they say, and their supposed morality is on point. But they blaspheme by putting idols, mainly Christ, before God and molding and graven images, which are an abomination. And the heads and promoters and fundraisers of these organizations are mainly sorcerers, snakes. It is the height of deceit. Many people seeking God in these religions are the flock. And when the truth, the Antichrist, emerges, they too shall become Antichrist. So therefore, who God keep is well kept, and only God can judge. But which God? There is only but one God, and there is none, will never be none besides him. Other issues contributing to confirmation according to the truth which I speak, including war in the Middle East. In particular, so-called terrorism. Many of these so-called terrorists themselves are undercover agents, snakes, inflicting violence rather than promoting spiritual demonstration, while others are called terrorists simply because they put up a resistance against so-called gay rights, which is backed up and promoted by so-called political freedom, which is backed up and promoted by the United States and their armed forces. Which is why they cannot seize the Middle East completely, like Africa and the Western Hemisphere. Asia is more like an ally, which is why they manufacture the majority of goods sold in the Western Hemisphere. They are more like industrial allies, which is why there is a vast amount of amount of Chinese business establishment, especially in the Caribbean and the US. They too worship idols and condone and not condemn homosexuality. They use psychology as if they are always ready to go to war with each other, but that is not true. At least to prove it, why did they stand back and let the US conquer Vietnam and Japan, the neighboring countries? Plus, they are all Asian. Besides, not joining forces probably because they wanted their heroin so that they can further allow self-destruction. Similar to Osama bin Laden, speaking of him, who himself, I understand, worked for the US or with the US, besides some so-called terrorists like bin Laden, who was a heroin dealer, oil bosses, sheiks, who would produce billions of gallons of this product, main entity in fueling machinery and motor equipment globally. Many of them are snakes, allying and joining forces with America in particular through greed, whereas they are aided directly and indirectly with armed forces along with their own militias, calling those in opposition terrorists. The US in return gets oil. These sheiks, along with citizens of the Middle East, want pleasures of the Western world, which they call freedom. Freedom to vote, eventually snort coke, cane, be gay, and enjoy their vanities, such as the supposed to be late Saddam Hussein and his regime. Please see the movie Devil's Double. It's a must. You make it your business to view. Search it on YouTube, even if you have to pay for it. Likewise, many of these so-called the rebels in Africa, many of them are snakes inflicting violence and conflict that many may seek, being victims, may seek asylum and refuge in third world countries, whereas they could, being vulnerable, help build and generate Sodom and Gomorrah with great appreciation in heart, thinking that they are in heaven. Well, who can blame them? At least that's how it seems. Then why are blacks the main victim of all social issues and ills of the society in the Western Hemisphere? But these people are even more vulnerable, so they would grasp anything what seems as an opportunity, including lodges, sorceries. Then they will have first preference to scholarships, jobs, and positions, the same as the Haitians where I am from. Likewise, in the drug world, on the streets, it is the same thing. In their case, particularly gangbangers, drug dealers, prostitutes, of all nationalities are in secret societies. But no need to be biased about colonial nationalities. That would only be self-deceiving and further separation for those of us who do not do witchcraft. Remember, Africa was already seized and split up by the French, Germany, and the English long before we were brought to the Western world and scattered wherever else abroad, meaning blacks had already forsaken their heritage and forsaken by their heritage, dating long before the Spanish Moors. Refugees are also required to praise and promote Christianity, which is enforced as if being administered. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, home and throne of the late Haile Selassie I, the first throne of David, which is no longer, at least presently, no longer, and the majority of Africa continent, besides some tribes, and even some South Africans who think that they are modernized and they are excluded. But South Africa is still laden with conflict and racism. Mainly whites come with their hands for hunger and medical aid along with Christianity, which is the cause of the affliction in the first place. And it's not the white man. They only maintain the advantage by further deceiving us spiritually, or as if they come to give a helping hand. So therefore, they can and will still gun you down. AIDS, a plague of Egypt, reason being sexual immorality, homosexuality, prostitution, etc. Drug abuse, they come with their AIDS awareness. Say no to drugs promotions. It is all deceit. South America is only one region. They can make humans extinct, animals extinct, whatever they want extinct, and they cannot eradicate the cocaine crop. It only grows in one region in the whole globe. AIDS, same thing. They legalized homosexuality. At least they never even criminalized it. And gays were the host of this disease. Secret societies, lodges have many drug dealers and prostitutes, killers and thieves. It is like mission impossible. If you are caught or complained about, even to the police, it's like we have no knowledge of you. So prisons are even full of them, which is why many of these gang members have this cross tattooed in the middle of their forehead, or they use it as jewelry. It represents death, just as Nazi Germany, Christopher Columbus, who murdered the West Indians after making landfall in the West Indies. Young Money Records, a particular artist, made this statement in one of his songs. New Orleans lodges in charge get murdered for Jordans. And when another hurricane comes and washes them away again, they all look to the sky and cry and wonder why. But you must oust the evil from amongst you. The cross represents, otherwise originally so many may think, Christianity, which is supposed to be of righteousness. But you must not. I advise you to. You must, for your own well-being, read the whole book of Deuteronomy and Lamentation and all the laws of God passed down to Moses in Leviticus. Pastors and politicians in particular are sorcerers. Secrecy and deceit is their lifeline and their foundation. Over the years, this organization has exposed itself inch by inch, whereas you can see and allow and pay it no mind, whereas your soul may be held more accountable, whereas they are not the only, but you are now responsible for the evil. Having kids yourself. You know what that means, right? The more you see and pay no mind and say it's not your business, that's the advantage they have, whereas God will hold you more accountable also. But it can also be beneficial, whereas one's eyes can be opened. Which is why, although the Bible has the deceit of Christ, they still have to tell or cannot hide the truth. It is God's covenant, His mercies towards us. So is God equal with the devil, whereas he must allow him to deceive you? Certainly not. He takes that amongst himself to do so, which is why he was cast away from God, the devil, the white man. So the white man can do so, just as even Job was tested and tried, but reason being, we all know right from wrong. Besides, it was said to Moses and the children of Israel that his word and his judgments and statutes will never change and are not to be rearranged ever. Nothing can be added to it or taken away. So you shouldn't argue, oh, No man, you shouldn't tell me that, oh, no man can lean on his own understanding. Oh, I already listened to you. You can now, it's time for you to listen to me. Nothing can be added or subtracted. His law, his statutes, his word is his word. No matter if I have sinned or not myself, I am not God. And no man is perfect. But the question lies, who is God? Therefore, the argument and the war will never cease because of that question alone. But there is only but one God, and there will never be another besides him. Okay? And his statutes will never change, are not to be rearranged ever. And there will never be another Savior, now, before, or forever. Thus said the Lord of hosts. To prove it, common sense. No matter what New Testament there is, does it change these laws, especially towards homosexuality and idols and graven and molten images? Like the cross, for example. Another reason the deceit is not being allowed by God, but he sits back and watches, because like I said, they say that everyone has a right to decide their own destiny, but right is right and wrong is wrong. You do not have a right, you have a choice, and that there is the fruit of good and evil, and man chose evil. Corruption, it goes far deeper than those who you depend on to fight it, being the corrupt ones themselves make it seem. Besides breaking God's law and persecuting you and me, there is a culture, especially amongst blacks, whereas we praise self-destruction and worship those responsible, when their job is to point the finger at us, deceive the public, take false credit, and reap the reward, so they think. But there is a bitter judgment. Politicians who hold, for example, I live in the Bahamas, and a certain prime minister who held office from 1967 until 1992, who himself indirectly is a known drug dealer who accommodated Noriega and Pablo Escobar, particularly on Norman's Key. This former Bahamian prime minister, now deceased, along with his administration and their criminal counterparts, who will be denied like Mission Impossible, all lodge members right down to those on the street corners. These scumbags are praised by many members of the public for destroying society with drug abuse, promoting disease, and creating delinquency. Many praise them for the love of money, and many fools just worship their own self-destruction, being shrunk out themselves and brought low, praising these corrupt drug officials, and are still persecuted and imprisoned, being used as a cover-up by the same political parties, not just in the Bahamas, in other countries. Just like the movie Top Shotters, these politicians are like Mr. Anderson. They use criminal counterparts to do their dirty work, who themselves will be disposed of if they were to reveal these matters. Many citizens still have the heart to complain when the effect left behind affects them here in the Bahamas. Many of these corrupt people with something to lose, when they are caught, run to Christianity that they may be accepted back into society. This includes politicians, pastors, even some are child molesters who just could not pay off the family of the victims right then or anymore. White-collar criminals who disappointed a lot of people, they turn to this Christ to regain innocence. And it works, reason being because everyone is deceived to believe that this Christ is the truth. This avenue of escape is another secret society trend, and they disappoint a lot of people, and it is not their first time committing these violations. It is just their first time being caught, being citizens or victims of corruption does not mean that we don't do wrong or commit offenses, but they violate God's law, so they should not be in position to judge. But through affliction we are persecuted by the wicked, and we remain afflicted through deceit, and we remain deceived because we allow mainly those of the same race, color, and creed to further deceive us with cultures and idols of the oppressor and the devil, and first of all, picking the fruit of good and evil, which we call a right to decide, which is not a right but a choice. Equal rights is an abomination. In other words, you seek an equal place in the world as the whites under the affliction of God. It can even be seen as rebelliousness, not turning back to him, but trying to make the best out of it, or trying to work around the curse upon us. One may grow old and work around it as far as you're concerned, but you have children and they have children and you have children's children. You know, they want an equal place in the world as whites, when that is not any individual's decision. For us as a people, we are God's chosen, a superior people. The whites, the devil, were cast from God's side, but now controls the pit beneath and here above on earth also, as long as we continue to forsake God. And the pit is hell. Many whites suffer just like blacks, like anyone else, because they are originally of bloodshed and barbarianism and poverty, further rebelling since departing from God, like Christopher Columbus and his crew, who had the cross on the sail of their ship. But God loves us blacks so much, but he won't partial, bend, or bow, but yet still will not go against his covenant, like the one he made with King Solomon concerning us. It is his love and his mercies towards us. Black Christ, those praising and promoting this cross with the circle on top, promote equal rights also, and they are also Christian, and that cross is also an abomination. They too strongly believe in equal rights, which they feel is justice. Their heads and their fundraisers and those who publish their messages are merely serpents who have their mouths open for the vulnerable, who seek God, but are not dumb enough to enjoin mainstream Christianity. They are also racist organizations. We are not supposed to mix races, but it is not the whites, it is God who afflicted us. They manipulate their flock to think that holding positions in the white man's world, which is so-called equal rights, such as President Barack Obama, many black athletes, etc., black Christ worshippers, many of whom are a flock seeking God and not serpents, will know the whole truth when they hear it. Rastafarians in particular would only need to drop the Rastafari, which is the name of a man in the flesh, and the Christ. They would have to drop it, because the Nazarene vow is truly sacred and of God. It is the priesthood. They are Levites and not Rastas. They are to be called Levites and not Rastas. Many Rastas are sorcerers also, preying on their flock, posing as brethren. They come with their weed and their money, seeking the vulnerable and gathering the flock and administering deceit. They are also in secret societies. Look at some of their parents and grandparents. A video which was produced by the Black Christ movement exposing Baphomet worshippers, mainly music artists. They themselves, just as many religions, tell you many things which are true apart from the so-called miracles of Christ, but in particular, they intentionally They promote this Christ anyway and teach from the books and use the ornaments of death, mainly the cross, to represent themselves. It is idol worship, which is the greatest sin, which means no matter how much truth they expose, it would lead back to nothing. They do this to gather the flock of those who are not easily deceived. They are snakes in sheep's clothing. But as the truth in particular, that of which I speak, emerges, those flocks will come over. Those flocks will come over. They have this mentality and talk. Oh, they act as if they are some sort of Christian. And they still do this and they still do that. They don't act like Christians. They really are Christians. Just that you are deceived and do not have a clue what Christianity is really all about. The majority of mainstream Christians are in secret societies, not all. The rest, being vulnerable or trying to praise who or what they think is God, are being deceived. And pastors don't just get rich off your tithes and offering. That's what they want you to watch, say, and think. But it's your funeral. That is the big business. The Ebony magazine are always full of large sorority and fraternity members, ranging from colleges to every so-called achiever being blacked in this evil system. They are all snakes and mainly Christian. In colleges around the world, fraternities and sororities are very rampant. They also try to recruit other students who are ambitious in their achievements, and in some cases sacrifice them. One must be tricked, then killed. And they tell you that they only want you to join trick you by making you think they only want you to join, and then trick and kill. Wanting to join will open your soul to the kill. Or if not, they will put a demon in your soul. They can put a spirit in your soul that sees everything you see, hear everything you hear, smell everything you smell, feel out your weakness, your strengths. And this demon, all of the members, particularly your family members, your friends and your colleagues, everyone in your daily routine has to be in this spiritual underworld, connected to this demon, watching everything you watch and seeing everything you see. But only the demon in your body can smell and feel everything you feel. But those surrounding members, they can see everything you see through this demon in your spirit. Feels what you feel. It will study your heart and your mind and your weaknesses. And if you like to commit any or all of the 7 deadly sins, then you too are open for the kill, that you may see the pit or your soul may perish. But the key ingredient is that you do not know who God is. Therefore, the majority of human souls are open for the take, for the kill. to prey on souls, human sacrifices. That is the main reason for deceit, that you may not seek God. If you hear voices, that is them, mainly family members of the so-called friends and colleagues. They themselves go in the spiritual underworld. They connect themselves with the spirit that is in your soul. You can hear their voices, but not clearly. That is how they play with your mind. This trend is used by them in every sector of society. It's called witchcraft. Family and friends of what the person, the victim, who they call Judas Iscariot, which is an innocent person. They are required, all of the friends and colleagues and family who are sorcerers are required to watch this person trip out or go crazy, talking to themselves, so it will seem, being confused and afraid. They will have people everywhere that person goes, especially on their daily routine, to block their avenues of survival. And the longer it takes for them to go crazy or give in, they will try to deceive you and help you, give you a little to deceive you, but not permanently, that you will be completely out of your stress, unless they cannot trample you. Only a little to deceive you, so that they can continue to smile in your face and trample you, putting traps and snares and trying to intimidate your every move. They would, and when all fails, they will even send the opposite sex to entice you. And even you might see them, that person might see them as refuge, being wearied of this witchcraft. Then they will slowly, that this opposite sex who they had sent, will slowly, after that person, the victim, appreciates them, they will cautiously, inch by inch, let them know indirectly who they really, what they are really involved in. And once they get the idea and ignore it, through appreciating this witch or this sorcerer, but they know that they are doing witchcraft, they will be spitefully used and then sacrificed. In gangs, this is also a common trend. Your own mother would allow these undercover junior mafia sorcerers to kill you. Reason being, they can do so because you studying gun violence and evil. In particular, you are a fool, as mentioned in the Proverbs. So your soul is open to the kill. And the mother is a witch. And it goes down as a gang-related killing, which is why these junior mafia sorcerers are out on bail so quickly. And many of them are closet homosexuals. I'm sure you've heard or even noticed. They range from age 10 and up. Spilling the beans is not an option, and it not can, but will result in them being exterminated. They are both male and females, and if they fail their sacrifice, they are automatically terminated. Those of you from here in the Bahamas should review my first set of videos. They are in my first videos are in Bahamian dialect, but I suggest you search them. I have 4 Facebook pages, but only 2 are active. Other reasons why people with this demon placed in their soul might feel helpless and look upon as crazy, it is because we have this culture in society, especially black people, and this secret society trend is to keep us with the same mentality that those people may seem helpless. Black people like to look, whereas we like to look down on each other. For example, we mock people if they can't afford a decent shoe on their feet. We do this so much until when it's our time to be in that position, we would rather sell our bodies or our souls even before we are seen lacking. Whereas we are put our pride so high and we are even too ashamed to ask for help. This is a trend allowed by those who speak the opposite. This mentality is common in schools everywhere. This teasing, mocking those lacking or less fortunate, which even creates criminals because many would rather take what they need than to endure this mental oppression. And those robbed of lunch fees and tennis shoes, etc., they even join the police force with a vengeance. Those taking lunch fees, etc., eventually graduate to crime, and many even sell drugs while in school for the same reason. Then the government will get the credit for combating crime, whereas you depend on them. And they get paid and reap souls at the same time. This mentality of teasing, mocking, and degrading is very common in our society for that very same reason. This is generally promoted by secret society members also, whose job secretly is to be intentionally, strategically, and first and foremost deceitfully evil. If 3 people dwell in a cesspool, they will be sent to make the 4th, and they will dwell amongst you deceitfully and even use you at the same time. They are through every corner. Many of them are undercover. They are the all-seeing eye. Yeah. They also prey on whoever they can. They like to take advantage of the weak and the innocent and the vulnerable by even drawing you and giving you a little that you may appreciate them and then using you. But for those who send them, it's all about dominion. Some of them are even right down to crackheads. Look at some of them and their parents and their backgrounds. They are well off. That there's the sin of the parents on the children. And don't sleep on them either. Some of them were born in it and not sworn in it. Some of them just joined the street division of this organization and got shrunk out, but they are still a brother in this organization. Although they are a drug addict, and some are just a disappointment because they do not meet the sinister requirements required to inherit from their parents. So they suffer, although they were a member from a child. My child's mother is also one of them. But I had not known her boyfriend, who cannot beat me. So they had jumped me some time ago for telling her the truth to her face in front of him, along with 7 other punks are also members, and some of them are dead already. These sorcerers can sit right down next to you and close their eyes and go into a spiritual dimension like the Matrix. And they have houses, cars, everything you possess earthly, you can transfer in the spiritual beneath. It's like the movie Sin City or the Matrix. You can be shot, burned, whatever, and rejuvenate like a vampire. And if they fail to conquer or sacrifice their victims, they are murdered and cast into a pit down there. Some are cast into a furnace for eternity. The soul never dies. The furnace is also used for disciplinary action. which is why they can't kill who they want, especially God's anointed, because the head of them will be persecuted and they will be cast in the furnace, and 1 second in it is unbearable. So they are not stupid, which is why they can't kill who they want as they like here on earth. Your soul must be open for the kill, which is why you should watch the friends you keep and what you do. They must first trick you, then kill you. Idol worship, which is why they bring the reverend right before they execute death row inmates. Few they cannot execute because they try them spiritually and they see that they are not any fools. And if they had executed them, it would bring plagues upon them. Some of them are members of the secret society, also death row inmates. They are sentenced to death to fool society, and then they are later released on appeal after the matter dies off. To further prove that we have a soul. Animals, mainly mammals, have similar features as humans, but they do not read, they do not build buildings, they do not design computers, etc., for example, which is why humans are subjected to judgment, which is why you have a soul. Another thing they always come with, this belief talk. Belief evolves around theory, meaning it could be fiction. They like to ask if you believe in Christ. The Lord says you require wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, not wisdom, belief, and understanding. Root word for knowledge is to know. What would you rather? What you see and know, or what they tell you that you may believe? Or you just can't accept the facts for whatever reason? Something else I should mention. Here. Praying with your eyes closed sends your prayer straight to the dark side. And when you put your hands together, it represents being cuffed, shackles. Put your two hands together from both wrists down to both elbows. In the middle, you will see the pyramid, which represents the pharaoh, just as the dollar bill. Speaking of the dollar bill, the budget, the country owing billions of dollars and spending billions of dollars on health care, on this and that. It is a lie, because everyone that manufacture and supply are part of a secret society, and material and supply are shipped from abroad and manufactured by foreigners, mainly the oppressor. And on one end, the government, for example, here in the Bahamas, is also white. The Queen, because Britain has a prime minister, and the Queen is higher. And the Governor General represents the Queen here in the Bahamas. So where does that leave your prime minister? If Britain has a prime minister also, right? Why do they still need a prime minister? If the Queen, it's obvious the Queen is higher than the prime minister. So why? So where does that leave our prime minister? If we still have Dame Margaret Pinling or whosoever should sit as Governor General in this country. They owe nothing, the government. They only make computer transactions, basically because the manufacturers are mainly white aristocrats, and money means nothing. It's control that is valuable. And we were stripped of our heritage, industrially, in every which way, through being afflicted. Which is why we are not independent. Bahamian businesses, so to speak, supply little for the government, and they still do not produce. And those business owners are also members. They have the contract, so to speak. And they make these individuals and they can break them. They build them and they can kill them. And these individuals are real ass kissers. For example, citizens are only laborers who only install, build, and work equipment and sell these products over. The government then gets false credit for providing jobs, etc. So value-added tax is a rip-off. The government really owes nothing. So who gains from this robbery? No one, really. It's just to keep one needing and wanting. Causes affliction through deceit, mainly spiritual, also otherwise. Politics in the US. We know that blacks have no place in Congress, and it is something which we are used to. And Barack Obama didn't make a difference. He only swore oath to the same so-called policies, legislations, whatever have you. But him nor the presidential seat is in no way of any headway for or interest of our heritage being restored, which is a spiritual initiative, which is why America, they have freedom of choice, meaning sexuality, religion, etc. And they claim they do not enforce religions, but Christianity is highly suggested and administered and campaigned and promoted. And the truth is left to seem discriminatory towards this so-called freedom of choice, which is their law, which makes the truth a rebellion in their society. Which makes the truth a rebellion. Here in the Bahamas, election is just a party time, especially rallies. They wear shirts representing political parties and candidates. Thousands of people gather for handouts. The majority don't even vote. It doesn't make a difference anyway, because politicians are frauds. So the majority rule for us means if 10 people out of 1,000 vote, the majority of that 10 determines who's in power. Huh. Well, these thousands of people or these groups are put together by secret society members also, who give away food, little money, etc. But people may seem supportive. These organizers are called campaign generals. Then the people still have a heart to complain and have issues and even suffer until the next election, which is never any difference or any changes made. They are held every 5 years. The youth, though, are being processed by the government. For example, besides math, comprehension, science, geography, family life, most other subjects are false doctrine. And the history may be true, but it is not our history. It is all a process to determine who has a fair chance of survival, or who feeds the snakes, the judiciary, the police, and the politician, who need the public to depend on them for protection, so to speak, and the police, pastor, etc. In other words, the rest of students who do not pass this process will be criminals or prostitutes, etc., unless they supposedly catch themselves later down being vulnerable. The system is designed whereas the credit will go to the fraud and the snake, and this is supposed to be called reform. But it is really strategy. Reason being, if we're supposed to be emancipated, English is not our original context. So why is it that it's not considered? And without mastering simple as English language or history, which is not our history or our language, we don't stand a fair chance, because it is a process more than fundamental. So the youth take blame and shame when the real louses and faulty ups are those snakes, the deceivers. They preserve the reasons for being afflicted. Besides maintaining deceit strategically, they condone deadly sins that are the cause and reason for plagues and affliction. Strategy besides deceit. Strategy is a very vital alternative for the oppressor. The adversary, for example, cocaine hit society like a wildfire, and in the process it had caused destruction and pain, but the motive besides destroying or self-destruction was, while doing so, the enemy, besides being an enemy to one another and oneself, the enemy would become further industrially, corporately, stronger and computerized, while we fill our pockets and kill each other and then kick down our doors years later and call it the war on drugs. Being, it being your choice, our choice, so to speak, being self-destruction, whereas we should feel guilty when we are really not the predator but the prey. The Bahamian Prime Minister from 1967 to 1992 and company and secret criminal counterparts, for example, they are the real ones working for the enemy. They are the real perpetrators. And they even plague the deepest slum right up to the present time. Corruption, maintaining false laws legislated and supported by those who break the laws of God, even the so-called ills they persecute, also wrong in the sight of God, are brought about deceitfully by them. They all say, I'm only doing my job, and their boss says the same thing, and it goes up the ladder, but they all only front for the devil and the oppressor and the whites and the cross, just as church, the synagogues of deceit and spiritual bondage, which fuels affliction. People such as priests or pastors who molest children, people who you look up to in society, who disappoint you by being corrupt, the church of which they had been using as a shield all the while to clear it, themselves would tell you it is God you come here to praise, and God forgave that individual, and they are not perfect. It is all a rip-off. Why? Rip-off mentally and spiritually. These corrupt individuals speak as if the system generates itself, or these churches and graven images promote themselves. That is not so. It's individuals such as them being used as vessels for destruction. Adolf Hitler. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the name, but not familiar with the real truth pertaining to his defeat. Blacks would have been the prime target had he not been stopped. But Queen Elizabeth and company, who knows God's covenant with us and knows that they must trick you to kill you, so they cannot wipe us out completely. And if they attempt to do so, they will suffer more than consequences. Could not afford Hitler to get to that point, and they had to forsake him. Those of whom he executed, who they claimed were Jews, are not. They are sacrifices. Elizabeth and company stuck to the original script: convert you from your heritage or keep you converted, deceive you for those of us who are blind, or let you drown in iniquity for which their society stands. Trick you and kill you, or you sell your soul. Queen Elizabeth and company are also from Germany. They migrated and conquered England. They are called Anglo-Saxons, barbarians. Okay? These are the symbols to further prove that you should not, I advise you not bear these symbols on your body or clothing. There it is. That's just the Lord's banner right here. Now watch this. That there is the star of which you wear. This here is the British flag. The cross is the base of the flag. Is a cross. The British flag. That there's the British flag. This here is the cross again. This. And there you have it. All of them are works of Sodom and Gomorrah and the kingdom of evil. Okay? So go in the encyclopedia and search Anglo-Saxon or Anglo-American. Anglo in the dictionary. America was also seized by them, which is why their soldiers joined forces. Remember, the stars on the flag Cuba is also an ally and acts not by being communist, which is why they detain so-called terrorists for the US and send the Cuban crime wave, for example, Tony Montana. They use Cuba to control who they allow to pass with shipments because they can become rich easily and become a government threat in the Caribbean and the US. And they are also a national guard for the US, whereas so-called terrorists do not use the Caribbean as a backdoor to the US, which is why a star is on their flag also. And it is the same color as the British and American flag. Haiti, another Caribbean country of which 98% of the population is black, and they speak broken French due to the fact that their slave masters were French, who are famous for driving Napoleon and company out with machetes and stones, who before then had supposed to have already had independence, etc., and then brought low for putting up this resistance, which was considered a rebellion. Aubert. Voodoo. Haiti is very famous and even feared very much for this black magic. But this black magic is the same sorcery represented by the Queen of England or the Lodge Freemasons, just as Christopher Columbus represented the cross. Likewise, Germany and the English. It's the same with the French, as Haiti was one of the first developing Caribbean countries and even in the industrial market due to their being colonialized, had totally collapsed after driving out their French dictators. But the sorcery was still left behind, but it was then considered black magic. Even though it is still kept secret in our society where the oppressor still has control over this country, unlike the French after they were driven out by the blacks of Haiti. The difference is these Haitians, for example, who are not monitored any longer by this organization due to them cutting themselves off from This sorcery can backfire on them easier because they do not have the support of this organization, which is global, to study their victims' spiritual backgrounds. Because if that person fears God, it will backfire. And they do not have the people in every area of society to play with that person's mind, mainly putting stumbling blocks in their way or stabbing them in their back and smiling in their face. This is an organization, and it is the way they operate. So even though Haiti still knew the sorcery, they had no means of survival. Remember, blacks only ended up in Haiti because of being afflicted. So you being afflicted and you try to rebel against those whom you are afflicted under, or your oppressors, without turning back to God, it is, it is like, this is like, it's a form of rebellion. Which is why they did not stand a chance. They might have won that battle with the French, but they still haven't won the war. Nowadays, many of them are surrendering, joining lodges, and advancing in society by migrating to other countries, especially in the Bahamas and Florida. Christianity is mandatory and vital for deceitful purposes, which is why numerous Haitian churches have been erected and established throughout the Bahamas, mainly Seventh-day Adventists. You will even see many of them with large banners on their vehicles, etc., throughout your neighborhoods. And many of them are on the police force and other government agencies, even politics, and are all throughout the job market in every sector of society. But no need to be biased about colonial nationality, as you should pledge allegiance to none. We are all from the same place under the same oppressors. The problem is pledging allegiance to this colonialism, which has no regard for God's law, which keeps plagues upon us, and the sorcerers and the snakes, the weak hearts and oppressors who devour us deceitfully, that they may eat bread, and they do so for the oppressor who awaits our soul to destroy it. And most of all, you as individuals who will be judged individually. For those of you who are not sorcerers, your soul is precious as long as you do not sell it. Although you may have been deceived or might not have been perfect, as long as you still live, you always have a chance. Unity will be even more strength, but not one must dare add or subtract from the true laws and his statutes, or else it's useless. It's every man for himself. Meaning nothing can be added or taken away. So there's no need for arguments. We are presently living in an evil system with no regard or love for humanity. They tell the children to honor their mother and father, but that advice should and would only stand for those under the true laws and statutes. Reasons being, if the parents administer deceit, which condemns and corrupts the mind and soul of the child, whether knowing or unknowingly, it still makes them a lamb to the slaughter, which is why it is written, mourn not for those that go, but for those that come. So mind you, the New Testament has certain what you call proverbs, which are apart from the old, which are basic common sense taken from the Old Testament, which are apart from the supposed actual events or miracles, which are myths performed by Christ, this Christ character. Not whose, but what's purpose is only to be a graven image and an idol, likewise the cross, an abomination. Read Deuteronomy, an abomination, whereas you may commit the ultimate sin. Nebuchadnezzar used force, but they are using deceit now. Now back to the children. The male put or appointed as the head nationwide and in the both nationwide and in the household is absent in many cases, especially spiritual guidance, which is the prime objective concerning many any man's relationship with God. Whereas this honor your mother and father sits under the fact that nothing can stand without God, including relationships, especially being married in the name of the false God by a pastor. Therefore, things unacceptable according to the true laws and statutes of God can easily be patched up as far as they are concerned. But review the law and statutes and see the consequences for cheating. And if God is so cruel, well, why would you have to separate because of it in the first place? Or need counseling, or have to kill your spouse? And all of it is basically because of the curse upon us and being afflicted. And who he blesses, no man will curse. And who he curse, no man bless, especially a pastor or a snake. So nothing can stand without him, which means you be building a house without a foundation, skipping scenes, it won't stand. You must return to him. His laws, his statutes, the truth, the light. Remember, nothing can be added or taken out of it. So they administer pure deceit by not administering those laws and statutes at all. Now, many of you taking it easy to consider selling your souls as an easy way out, whether it's because you feel as if you can't beat them, you want to join them, or many women being a hazard, some spitefully forcing men to neglect their children, or some men worse than women just neglecting them. My logic is women bring forth male and female being more vulnerable. Also, females, the majority of black women being single parents, the wicked targets them, reasons being that their regeneration and is also vulnerable. But nevertheless, the men are responsible for this. So being a single parent, a woman does demand and deserve respect. But the system also urges them to exercise so-called rights against men, that they may use your kids even against you. They even do it to the women sometimes, mainly drug addicts, when it's them responsible for the drugs and the ills in society. A police officer asked me some time ago, Jagger, when will you stop your shit? Whose child is that I saw you with the other day? I said, mine. He said, you should change because of him. I said, you don't care about me, because me being a victim of police brutality myself. I said, you don't care about me. I was his side, so how could you care about him? You're waiting on him to get older to do the same thing for a salary. And plus, you're a snake and a deceiver. Now, many of you may go back to square one after all I had said and ask, what does this put in my pockets? Or how does this feed my family? Well, me personally, my blessing as far as relief and comfort is concerned is right around the way. Reasons being, if I had it now already, I would not be motivated to bring forth this message. I'm like Jonah in the whale's belly, you know. So that's how God's operate. His ways are unknown. But as for you, I will type a prayer on my Facebook page, and I would like for you to review and read my prayer and type Salah. And thereafter, anything you put your mind to or any investment you make will become a total success. Buy a number. Look for Jagger Johnson. I should have the prayer. It's very interesting. You should check my Facebook page before this week is out, before Monday, and I should have it typed. Goodbye, everybody.